That means we could talk about real stuff, whatever things you want to know.
No, I told one lady, I'm like, hey, I know you're running for politics, but I'm going to ask you what your favorite color was at 14. And she was like, I do know that answer.
You know that might be like a password security question, right? Sometimes they ask what the question is.
Chris is actually trying to hack everyone's life. He always asks what their first vehicle is, what their color
What's
car.
your favorite food? What's your car?
You say that, and I'm like, that was never... Like, that's just what's in my head. I'm like, oh, it's probably because I've had to change my password so many times.
Yeah. Welcome back to the Whiskey Wisdom Podcast, everybody. Thank you all for coming. I am your co-host, Tyler Yaw, and today I'm with...
Chris Kellum.
And our special guest today is...
Mike Ross, Libertarian candidate for governor of North Carolina.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on. We greatly appreciate it.
Yeah.
And so we have already sipped on something today, but what are you sipping on today?
So I am sipping on a delicious Buffalo Trace Old Fashioned.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
That's the way to do
Classic.
it right there.
Why'd
Very
you
good.
pick Old Buffalo Trace?
Because I'll be honest, it came down to the fact that I ran out of Buffalo Trace at home, and
okay.
I saw some of the other things I drink, and I'm like, I have that at home. I don't have Buffalo Trace, so let me get a Buffalo Trace Old Fashioned.
Nice.
That's exactly what I do when I go out to. I'm like, what's not on the cabinet?
Yeah.
We have so much whiskey. That's
I mean-
the problem now.
And having this at a bar where there's even more whiskey, like that's...
Yes.
I know.
I'm excited. This is one of the few podcasts I can come out and have a drink and...
Yeah, it makes it a little bit more fun, laid
Yeah.
back, and the purpose of what we do and why we like to bring on candidates when they actually come on and want to talk to us is to have a conversation about you and a little bit more into what the candidate is. The actual series is called People Over Politics, so we want to know a little bit behind it. So there was actually a podcast I listened to last night. It was the Nelk Boys. They brought on J.D. Vance.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, I know nothing about this guy, but I know they do a good job of not getting into policy because a lot of those guys, the D's and the R's, are going to lie to you about what they're going to do anyway.
Yeah.
So I don't want to hear your policy anymore. I just like, who are you?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what we like to do, kind of a little bit more about you, what you're doing, and why you feel like running. But before we get into all of that, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I'm almost 42 years old, couple more days. Recently semi-retired, spent most of my career as a financial planner.
Yeah.
A few years ago is when I really got politically active. I saw something really horrific in my community in Gaston County, North Carolina.
Oh, yeah.
And it bothered me viscerally. So I went and I talked to the town council, and it really came down to basically our local law enforcement tased a homeless veteran service dog.
Yeah.
And he was crying for the body cam footage to be released. The news sent a message to the judge saying, hey, sent a letter to the judge saying, hey, we want this released. Judge says no. So I said, well, let's apply some political pressure. Go talk to the city council and say, hey, this all happened in your town. Clearly a public interest. Can you get it released? Well, that ultimately ended up leading into a 9-month fight with 9 rallies that I brought together all kinds of, right, left, center, all kind of parties, and we came together, and it was a 9-month political fight to get that body cam footage released. And in that course, I met a guy named Pastor Moses Colbert, who runs Faith, Hope, and Love Community Enrichment Ministries, which feeds somewhere between 100 and 200 homeless people a day. We teamed up and ultimately saved his church because the city was trying to shut that down.
Yep.
And over the course of that process, I was never a person who wanted to be in politics. I was like, I'm a homeschool dad, have a family. I'd much rather just live my life and try to get the government to leave me alone as much as possible.
Yeah.
And then some libertarians around the 6th or 7th rally, they said, Mike, we need a good messenger. We need someone to kind of be an independent voice and someone who really seems to care about like regular people, because the political system, at least as a libertarian, I think none of them really care about us.
Right.
So at first I laughed it off, said no, and then more and more people started asking. And then by the 9th rally, when we started to kind of get some wins and we went before a judge and finally got the body cam footage released, I said, enough people are here. If you guys will work together and kind of build this up. I've never run for office. I had no plans to run for office, so I'm going to need a team. And surely enough, like amazing libertarians were all jumping, and I got a great campaign manager, press secretary, like a huge team that came out of nowhere. And I said, if all these people want me to be the messenger and fight for these things that libertarians in the state are fighting for, because they're in the interest of regular people, I'll do it. And that's, fast forward to that, there was a contested primary. I give my team all the credit for the win there, and here we are going into the general. So,
Yeah.
hopefully we can move the direction move the needle in the direction of liberty. And if enough people check a box next to my name, I think we can really shake up politics in a way that puts the people of North Carolina above the special interests, above the political favors, and all the stuff that I think is moving us away from the place that I think most North Carolinians probably would want our state to be.
Yeah. The one thing, I'm going to take a step back first.
Yeah.
So the things that you were talking about, those two issues, I actually learned a lot about through Spike Cohen and You Are the Power.
Yeah.
He spoke a lot about it on his social media. We actually had him on the podcast as well, too, which was a lot of fun. But going past that, when it comes to having, for anyone who's out there, it's like, oh, well, he's not a Democrat or Republican, whatever those stories are, right? The thing that I think would be the most interesting is if you could get someone at the top of the ticket to be anything other than Democrat or Republican, everyone's going to be forced to actually have to work together to do something, to accomplish something. And I think that's one of the most powerful points of having, especially Libertarian up there, because there's some issues that lean a little bit more right, and there's some issues that lean a little bit more left. And honestly, as you said prior, everyone who's out there already, that just the average human being that's living life in North Carolina, they don't really care about what the right's talking about, the left's talking about. Like, let's get some real, actual stuff done.
Yeah, I mean, we just want, for the most part, all humans, right? We want life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, like the American dream that's there. And sadly, I don't think that most politicians are even thinking in that realm. It's all about agendas, dividing us along culture war issues and all these things, because, the reality, I look at it and knowing, you have a financial background too, like we're $35 trillion in debt as a nation. 20 years ago, most people and even economists would laugh at the idea of that reality. And I don't think most people understand economics or finance enough to really understand what that means 20 years from now if we stay on that path. And I don't see anybody in the major parties trying to do anything about it. And as someone whose whole career was spent in that area, I don't want my kid, when he's having kids, to have to pay like $10 or $15 for a gallon of milk. But if we keep printing money and increasing the supply, chasing the same number of goods, that is all but guaranteed to happen. And the only reason it wouldn't be guaranteed is if they can somehow keep a house of cards going. And that's what scares me, because nobody's talking about it. And North Carolina is really interesting, because that's a point I make when we get into policy, right? Everyone's like, well, you're a libertarian, you're outside of the system, you're not going to have a friendly General Assembly. Like, how are you going to get anything done? And to me, I kind of step back because it seems really obvious to me.
Right.
Do you understand the magnitude of what that would mean for a third-party candidate running on a common-sense platform to actually win, to beat the Republican and Democrat? To me, that becomes a mandate on what that person ran on.
Right.
Because now millions of people in the state said, we want something different. We're hungry for something different. We voted for someone different, even though everyone, every step along the way, is telling us we're wasting our vote. We're throwing it to the other guy. If you imagine the magnitude of what that happens, I mean, the only real-life example we've seen anything close to that is what happened in Argentina recently.
Right.
And everyone said the same thing with Javier Milei. Oh, he'll never be able to do anything. He's only got at most 20% of the legislature. It's a brand new party. You shock the system at that level with that kind of support, guess what? The legislature's going to do what's in the best interest of the people, because they have no choice at that point. And that's my thing, where, if you're doubting it can be done, shock the system at a level that's never been done in the United States history. I think you'd be surprised what the power of the people can actually accomplish when the government actually has to pay attention to them.
Right, because the power does go back to the people at that point. It's amazing. It's the people that are around you aren't as stupid as what people or the politicians are going to tell you they are.
Yeah,
So.
yeah. They want us there. The problem is it's in their interest to do that. Like that's one of the things that really bothers me is I'm very anti the system, but the system, I don't think the average Republican or Democrat politician really cares even if they win or lose. And I know that's a weird thought process, but the reality is the system itself, the way they have it in this two-party system, win or lose, they're still getting the campaign donations. They know they're going to come back next time to a censored ballot where they only have to compete against one guy. So even if they lose and that guy pushes it in a total opposite direction, in a sense, that actually benefits them, because if they go too far, now it becomes easier for them to win the next time. So I'm really trying to take the approach of let's call out what both sides are doing that's wrong. and how that hurts regular people.
Yep.
And if you can cause enough to break that paradigm, I think the demographics of our state, we have a very rebellious spirit here in North Carolina, going all the way back to, running moonshine and you look at that, and I think that that's really quite prevalent in the makeup of our voter base. Like the largest block of voters in this state is unaffiliated voters. There's more of them than Republicans or Democrats. So that to me says, hey, our state is ripe for that. We just need someone to come along with a message that inspires people to say, you know what, we're going to take a chance. We're going to not buy in to the propaganda that, that this is the most important of our election of our life, which I've heard every single election of my life.
Yep.
Which it's either true or it's all nonsense, and I would argue it's all nonsense. I think the real most important election is the time that we actually step up and vote against the system. And that's, I think North Carolina is primed to do that. I'm trying to do that. I know that there's libertarians and other independents in every state hopefully trying to do that. And I'm optimistic because I talk to people in North Carolina, and people in North Carolina are wonderful, wonderful people.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that if we could just let the people of North Carolina really focus on things without all of the nonsense of politics, I think we could hit new heights as a state. Not only getting our number one economic spot back, but solidifying it so hard that no state will ever come close. I really think that we could do that if we just get the government out of the way.
Yeah. One of my favorite things when people ask me, at least personally, it's like, don't you feel like you're throwing your vote away? Isn't that crazy that you're voting for someone who doesn't have a chance to win? I was like, well, Einstein told me that doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, is what the definition of insanity is, which is essentially what crazy is.
Yeah.
And you haven't been happy under the Democrat leadership or the Republican leadership. So no, I don't think I'm crazy. I think you might be a little bit more crazy. And then when it comes to throwing your vote away, I have friends that live in Texas that vote Democrat. I think that's throwing your vote away. And I have friends in California that vote Republican, and I also think that's throwing your vote away. So if you're looking on those ends of the spectrum, I think actually voting your conscience and voting who you truly believe is the right candidate for the job is what we as Americans, whether it's on the state or national level, we're meant to be doing. So basically, that whole entire statement for the question for you is, what do you tell people for the ones that say, hey, you know what, it's throwing my vote away?
Yeah, I mean, so I think that argument, because you can look at it, it's both a logical argument as well as an emotional argument.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think that the emotional argument is the only thing that even really has any strength anymore. Because you look 20 years ago, there wasn't much appeal, aside from that one run where Ross Perot came in, but in general, 20 years ago, polling showed that most people seemed to be okay being either Republicans or Democrats. But you look at some of the most recent polling, not even just in North Carolina, but nationwide, like more people are unhappy with both choices than ever before.
Yep.
And it's a large majority of the population.
Yep.
So if that's true, if we look at this and we just make the assumption, okay, people are saying this is true, is it really true? Well, if 60% of the population is tired of the system, all it takes is having the courage for everybody who truly doesn't believe in this system and truly doesn't want either of those candidates to come together and unite around someone who has a vision that can actually do something. As soon as we, the people, actually see that data and act on it and say, we're going to reject your emotional argument and we're going to follow this data and say, you know what, this is the year. The first time we do that, that's how we shock the system. I don't know if this is going to be the year that we do that in North Carolina. I'm going to try my darndest between now and November 5th to make that the case. But I think at some point, it almost has to happen.
Yeah.
Like it almost has to happen. It's just how much pain do we have to instill on future generations? Right now, it's up to $35 trillion that my kid, his kid, his grandkids that make, like, they're going to pay back the stuff that we already, have paid. I don't know how much longer we can go before that gets to the point where it becomes so painful to the regular person. I'm hopeful and optimistic that we don't have to go the route of Argentina, where our entire middle class collapses and loses everything because they lose control of the currency and we deal with 100% year-over-year inflation for a decade. Because the reality of that is everybody who's worked their butt off to retire independently, whatever, when you lose control of the currency and you start seeing hyperinflation, it doesn't matter if you've been responsible and saved $1 million and, set yourself up for success, because when that, dozen eggs is now $500, your $1 million is not going to go very far. And that's the sad reality of the path that we're on if we don't change things. And I know that some people are like, that's a very doom and gloom message. I've heard people say that, and I'm really not trying to go doom and gloom. I'm just stating an inconvenient fact of the economic and monetary situation we're in. We can either accept that and address it, which nobody in Congress seems to want to do, or we can keep going down that path and making it worse. I think it's about time at the 35 trillion mark, maybe we start paying attention before we deal with the fact that, you know, in 20 years, it's not unreasonable to see $15, $20 milk. I don't think the average person in North Carolina or America wants that. I think if they were told, hey, this is going to happen if we stay on the current path, I think they would say, then we need to change paths. But nobody's going to tell them the truth that that's the path we're on. I'm going to, whether it's popular or not, whether it's doom and gloom or not, it's the truth. And I think if we get behind it, that's the optimism. That's the hope. We can fix this, but you can't fix a problem if you don't acknowledge the problem.
Yeah, my favorite thing when people bring that up too is, okay, so you're telling me that the education debt, the college debt that all of these people have is such a huge issue, and we need to eliminate that, but you're okay with having $200,000 per person in America be on top of them in that debt too, indefinitely, and continuing to put it on top of it on their behalf, and they don't even have the choice to do it?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay, I see where your like morals lie now.
It's scary, and I think part of it goes back to, and I know we don't want to talk too much on policy, right? But I can't help it because policy is you know, as someone there, it's relevant here. I think that's one of the failures of our education system, right? Like I look at the education system, and we have a scenario where there's so many kids coming out of high school, turn 18. What's the first thing they start getting in the mail? Credit card offers. Yeah. Was there any realistic financial literacy taught in most public high schools in this state? No. So you end up having a situation where you have an 18-year-old, maybe goes off to college, maybe they got a scholarship, maybe they didn't, don't really fully understand how compound interest works, how APRs, all of these things there, and they're like, oh, okay, we'll just put it on the credit card. Well, now you rack up even $5,000, you're making minimum payments. Before it's said and done, you have someone who is 18, is now thousands of dollars in debt, and before they are all paid off, especially if they only make those minimum payments, they paid 3 times what they originally paid, all because they don't understand. And that, rather than trying to educate and do that, that's in the financial interest of these mega corporations that are making these donors, and that's how it keeps going. I don't know if there's an incentive for government to actually truly fix that, because if you truly have an educated population that understands economics and understands how the money supply works and how all of that comes to be and why inflation really happens, you know, it's so easy to say, oh, it's corporate greed, it's corporate greed. Maybe a little bit. But, you know, you go from 20 trillion in debt to $35 trillion in debt, that's going to do something to prices of everything. And if you say it's not, you don't understand economics, and that's okay. Maybe the school system failed you, but we have to start getting back to an educated population. And I think that the direction that our school system is going is in the wrong direction. And that's why that's one of the first things that I think to tackle here in North Carolina, because I think that our state is actually primed for it. 1 in 5 students in this state does not go to public education. Okay, whether it's homeschool, whether it's private schools, 1 in 5. We have one of the largest growing homeschool populations of any state in the country, and I think that that's a direct result of when the only option that's available to you is not a good option, you start looking outside the box and finding other options. And, you know, that's what I really think is the solution to fixing education. It's one of the few places that you see a monopoly growing, and monopolies are generally anti-competition. And if you restructure the system in a way that forces the public schools to compete for those dollars, one of two things is going to happen. Either the public school system is going to say, hey, maybe we do have some administrative bloat. Maybe we do have our resources allocated inefficiently. Maybe we need to shift that. Maybe we need to pay our teachers more, since they're the primary drivers of education, and pay all of these supplementary regional and district administrators. You know, maybe they don't need $300,000, $400,000 right? Yeah. You reallocate that, and the public school system will compete. But if you really look at how the free market should work, and envision a situation where those dollars are actually being competed for, I mean, a teacher could basically, you know, we spend $13,000 per student in the state. Like I sent my kid to a private school for years, and it was like 7 or 8. And their graduation rates, their scholarship rates, it was all tremendously higher. Like, why are we spending $13,000 to send a kid to a school that has like a 25% on grade literacy and math rating? we're spending more money for that than something that has demonstrably better outcomes. And I think that the only way that you could ever have that in an economy is if it's being funded by the taxpayer and the government.
Right.
Because in anybody who's taking risk, if you're taking risks, you simply can't do that. You
Right.
can't have an inefficient system like that because you're wasting money and you've got a business. But when you have a blank check, and large numbers of politicians saying that the only solution that we need is more money, without evidence, without evidence, that's when I start thinking, okay, really outside the box. And I get it. My education plan's radical. But I think that having a 5% on-grade math rate, which is the case in some of Charlotte Mecklenburg schools, and their 5-year goal is to get that up to 25%. Like if your goal is to get to a 75% failure rate, the whole thing needs to be thrown out. Whatever you're trying to do, you need to rethink it, because a 75% failure rate is unacceptable to me. And I think it's unacceptable to most people in this state, and certainly most parents.
Yeah.
It's true.
So like my family itself is educators, like across the board. And it always hurts my brain to think like, as you move up in ranks, like as principals or like superintendents or like whatnot, these people, and typically like your assistant superintendent's still not making a ton of money. It's the guy at the very top making, or woman making a lot more money. And I'm like, well, if we took your pay rate down and you were able to add more teachers into school, then we could help. So like, because I have family who also does homeschooling. I'm like, homeschooling works because you can control the amount of children who are being educated at one time.
Sure.
And you can focus on these people. And that's what's happening, I think, across the board, is there's these classrooms that are having 25 to almost 40 kids with one educator.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, hey, why don't you understand how to do 2 + 2? Well, no one's sitting beside me to help. And then the parents are stuck. They can't help you at home because they have to work because our rents are going up drastically, or something else has happened. I'm like, if we all worked and balanced the system, it would make so much more sense and help more people.
Yeah.
But like you said, there's a lot of people at the very top who are getting paid too much money, and they don't care about the people at the bottom.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. Just, I haven't studied all 100 counties in North Carolina, but just look how much they spend on school board races.
Right.
Just look how much money is spent on school board races. You're looking at a position that maybe pays $10,000 a year, and you're getting hundreds of thousands of dollars. And in some of like the really big areas, I wouldn't be surprised if some of them are spending $1 million. What are you buying?
Yeah.
Like what are you buying?
Right.
This is supposed to be a public service role where you're working in the best interests of the students in your communities. And I'm against central planning as a whole. I don't think that I could even begin to come up with a solution for everybody. But I do think that one of the logical solutions that would at least realign the economics of education and ultimately reward the people who should be rewarded, the teachers, is micro schools. Because this whole situation where you throw 500 kids or more into a building, pack them in, almost like prison-like in some ways, right? As far as the way, and you look at the outcomes versus, a micro school. If you just reallocate that and allow teachers to essentially operate as small businesses, and you're like, okay, take a teacher, they take 10 kids, right? Take your classroom size down from 30 to 10, and just ask the teacher, do you think you'd be able to give a better education to those kids? Well, of course, every teacher's,
absolutely,
of course. Well, then you just shift the economics. Well, what happens now? You have a teacher who can set up a micro school in their house, bring in those 10 kids. You now have $130,000 top line. You can provide all kinds of tech, meals, whatever you want, and still double teacher pay. And all you're doing is saying, we don't need the government to create all of this bloat. If you just realign that, I think that the teachers are the biggest winners, at least as far as the economic, but the real winner is society. Why? Because now you have smaller class sizes. You have teachers that can look at it and say, we don't have a one-size-fits-all approach being dictated by a state level, federal level, or even county level school board. We can meet with the parents of our kids, individualize education. And if you do that for 10, 20 years, I think, North Carolina will be the destination of all states for the best teachers on planet Earth because of the opportunity alone. All the teachers that the bureaucracy and the red tape, I mean, I'm sure if there's a lot of educators in your family, I've heard enough talking to North Carolina teachers that say, The bureaucracy and the red tape has driven some teachers out of the profession.
Yep.
Driven some to say, you know, I have these ways to do it, but I can't engage with these students, and you just get forced into this system. So then I, you know, as a finance guy, like I'm always asking, who benefits from this system? Because that to me tells me the biggest thing, like who is really benefiting from this system? And sadly, when I look at education, it's not the teachers, it's not the kids, and it's not society. So why the heck are we doing the same thing?
Right.
Like, why are we doing the same thing when the only important stakeholders in this equation are being left behind? And the only winners, I don't think regular people really care if they win or lose.
Yep.
So, yeah, that's sorry to dip into policy. Education's a big one for me, man. It's the biggest piece of our state budget. So if you pay taxes in North Carolina, they're spending your money really, really poorly. Yeah. And it I don't know. I don't think it takes rocket science to fix. I mean, you know, if you're spending too much money for bad outcomes, you got to make it more efficient and look for other solutions. And it just doesn't seem like too many people are willing to do that.
Yeah. We're going to go completely weird opposite direction real quick, and then we'll come back on topic. So I was looking at your campaign website. Do you actually know Charlie Sheen?
I don't. So when we first started the campaign, right? And I love it because we're first setting it up, and I'm like, I know we want like endorsements here, like a spot for endorsements to come in. And, you know, I like to think that humor is a really important thing because I look at it, you know, 35 trillion in debt as someone who spent their career in financial planning, like that's some scary stuff. If I can't bring some laughter and humor into my life, that would be bad. So I actually had I think 5 or 6 humorous endorsements on there that we started to replace. But the Charlie Sheen one and the Jason Momoa one, I just liked it. I just leave them there. And
I haven't seen that one yet.
I've had quite a few people who reached out to me for interviews. That was the thing that they saw that, and so credit to my web designer for that one and my team because it's kind of just a nod to keep it.
Works.
But yeah, no, and I don't think Charlie Sheen actually lives in Mecklenburg County either. But
there probably is a Charlie Sheen.
A Charlie Sheen,
right?
Yeah.
Jason Momoa, but you could have a Charlie Sheen in Mecklenburg.
Yeah.
It's a large enough county.
Yeah, I don't sadly don't know Jason Momoa either, and Danny DeVito's not on there anymore. But I also don't know him.
Oh, that would have been a good one.
Darn. That's such a random. That'd be something I would post and be like, "Hey, so and so said it," and like, what was it? The like KFC on Twitter, whatever you want to call it, is followed by they only follow 11 guys named Herbs, and then the Spice Girls, and I was like, see, so you got to make light of it sometimes.
I mean, to me, that's great. Like looking at on X, Wendy's social media team.
I know, it's amazing.
Sometimes they put their foot in it, but you know what? You can't be so serious. The world is very serious.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And I think that covers enough seriousness. So I mean, I'm very much my platform serious. I'm serious about trying to fix the direction. But if I can't stop and laugh at myself, laugh at the world, laugh about the situation, what's the point, right?
Right. I think that's a very important part to kind of throw it all in there too. So I figured this conversation, when I asked that question, was going to go one of two ways. Either you knew him from weird some way, or two, it was just to add some light to what everyone thinks is so doom and gloom. And so I do appreciate that, and it did make me chuckle when I was looking it up.
Yeah, I mean, it was... I like a little bit of humor. Politics is so serious, and I get it. Why, right? Like we're talking about policy that impacts the lives of millions of people, that touches their wallets, their day-to-day life. It's really quite serious stuff. I think that if you only do serious stuff, it can be overwhelming. And I want people to know, look, I'm not a stuffy politician. I didn't show up here with a suit. And I'm never going to be a stuffy politician, even if they elect me, right? If you elect me, I'm not going to change. I'm not going to start being a politician. I'm not going to change on core principles that have taken 42 years to build into my psyche. That's not going to change. I'm going to keep an open mind, but I'm certainly not going to do what most politicians do and ignore reality because reality is inconvenient for an agenda. It's just never going to happen. It didn't happen as an activist, and it sure as heck isn't going to happen in this foray.
So were you aware of the Libertarian Party and what they were a part of before becoming more actively participating?
Yeah.
Or was it? kind
Yeah.
of them coming to you?
Yeah, so I was a small L libertarian for
Okay.
like most of my life, and
Okay.
and for a while I was in that camp that a lot of people are, right? Like I didn't register with the LP because most of my county commissioner or city, was partisan. So if I wanted to vote in a primary and actually have any real meaningful say, I would be unaffiliated. And then something kind of hit me where it's like I did this thing where, I've said it before. I voted for Obama in 2008. I voted for Trump in 2016. Not that I particularly liked Obama or Trump as a libertarian. I just thought within my own personal calculus of the two-party system that was what I thought was best.
Right.
So I was in that voting for the lesser of two evils. And every time I'm like, well, man, even though in this case, both the guys I want, it always gets worse. And, so around 2020, I said, look, I'm a libertarian. I can either keep going this route. I had some buddies who were in, the Republican Liberty Caucus. And I said, I just believe that the Uniparty is fundamentally broken, that the inherent incentive structures behind it will never incentivize either party to truly act in the interest of the people. And I believe that libertarian policy ideals and libertarian philosophy can do that. So if I believe that, do I stay in this game or do I say, okay, the Libertarian Party's not there? But I could either sit by or I can get active. And that's what I did is I got active. I started and, like most libertarians, we're a small party. So it was come in quick. Hey, do you want to get involved in your county affiliate? Before I knew it, I was like on my county affiliate board and the state party treasurer. And people were like, oh, do you want to run for office? And it was a little overwhelming, but I feel good about what I'm doing. That was kind of the thing that I joked being in financial planning because my activism is all about the community, the homeless, like things there. And part of that was balancing like the reality of like my day job is like I help rich people get richer, right? Like, and it's not that that's a problem because I'm helping them navigate a pretty atrocious system that keeps inflating and printing money. But I wanted to do something that at least made me feel good about myself, like because the career. So I tried to do that by taking on clients that I'm making no money on and like doing pro bono stuff. But that was just something that I said, okay, let me shift. And when I started getting more engaged in politics, I jumped into the LP, NC, head first, and now I'm running for governor on the ballot against Mark Robinson and Josh Stein in a matter of like 3 short years.
So I have a semi-random question.
Yeah, man.
Do you think that we should have political parties, or we should just be running on people's like thoughts and what their policies are?
Yeah, I mean, if I had a magic wand and could make it
so.
so.
No. That's just my thought. Is like, of course, you can't just say we're done with the two-party system or we're out to 5 parties or whatever. But what was your like thought process?
Yeah, I mean, my thought process is I think that as soon as you group or design buckets for groups for people to self-sort them into, you've already taken your eye off the ball. Because as soon as you start dividing into groups of people, right, where you're on a team, nothing matters except the team because you've divided into teams. So if I could immediately say all parties just disappear and everybody has to run on platforms, I fully understand. Guess what? The PACs are still going to be there. There's still going to be all of these things. But if nothing else, it does away with what I think is one of the big problems of that team-based system, which is kind of like that straight party ticket voting, right? Like if you were there, I've seen it. Like I mean, how many?
So many times.
Well, and not only that, just looking at the Charlotte, like there was a big one where I think there wasn't a super majority for the GOP, and then like a Dem who was in Charlotte decided to go to the GOP, and like despite the fact that they ran on all this Democrat stuff, now they're voting with the GOP, and like. You get into this team sport, the incentive structure only says team over everything, and I don't think that's in the best interest of people. So if I could do away with political parties, of course, but I think in the shorter term, there's been big issues here in North Carolina lately with third parties. There's a huge momentum for third parties, and that's something that I've tried to be a champion in. Like, if I've got a voice right now, I do. When as someone who's running for governor on the ballot in November, maybe some people who are listening to me who wouldn't otherwise. And that's something I've been a champion of. Like Robert Kennedy and Cornel West are trying to get on the ballot. Yeah. And the State Board of Elections is, quite frankly, operating against the interest of the people of North Carolina. They're suing. They're blocking things off. They're drumming up nonsense. And I know, like, I've talked to all these parties, and there's a really interesting, almost unity movement in third parties, and that's really encouraging. Where, with the Justice for All Party, I am an ally in their fight. I will champion their voice. I think they should be on the ballot, and I think that they see that. So if the Republicans and Democrats with all this partisan nonsense mess around and unite the third parties, I'm all for it, because that's how we can actually shake up that system.
Exactly. It's really neat, and it makes me even more optimistic than I typically am anyway, where you have, I'm just going to use two third parties as an example. So you have the Libertarian Party and you have the Green Party, literally opposites when it comes to policy and how they believe. You have them coming together and saying, oh, you're trying to get your person onto the ballot? Okay, great. Let me sign this petition for you both ways. And all of these people coming together to try to get as many people on there, because the one thing that I think does unify everyone together is these two parties aren't doing it.
Yeah.
So I think that's interesting.
There's funny, and this is something, just kind of a tangent, but as a numbers and data guy. So I had a debate in the primary season, and we had the Forward Party put it on. We had two Libertarians, a Republican, a Democrat, and the Green Party candidate. So as a data guy, I'm looking at how the polling goes and like how the straw poll votes with the ranked choice voting pull off. Right. And it was really interesting because Wayne Turner, who is the Green Party candidate for governor and one of my opponents, right? When he dropped out in the ranked choice voting, I just assumed, based on like left-right alignment, I think he got 3 votes in that round. I would have just assumed that they went to Mike Morgan, the Democrat candidate, because at least ideologically there was more overlap. They actually came 2 to me, 1 to Mike. And I was really surprised, because in that debate, one of the big things that came up was like our difference as far as economic systems, where he comes, I'm an eco-socialist, and I'm a very big free market capitalist. So it was really interesting, and to me that's encouraging, right? Where they looked at it and they said, I apparently, because clearly if you're like very socialist, you probably disagree with me on economics. Right. But over the course of that debate, despite the fact that there was another person who maybe agrees with you more on economics, I don't know whether I came across as more genuine. I don't know if it was the other issues that they're like, oh, wow, this guy's right on these things. Yeah. But I just found that interesting. And to me, just another data point that says third parties uniting is probably the biggest threat to the Uniparty system. And that's why, from now till November, I'm going to continue working with third parties, supporting third parties, and long after, really. I mean, as a Libertarian, I signed the Green Party petition years ago. I signed every party's petition, and we'll continue to do that, because the reality is we need more choices, we need more options, and the only people trying to stop that, at least in North Carolina, it's primarily the Democrats, but go look at what's happening in Oregon. The Republicans are doing the same thing there. Exactly. So it's funny to see the North Carolina Republicans like, oh, it's not us, it's just the Democrats. Well, yeah, maybe here, but you guys are doing the same thing other places where you don't have a supermajority. Yeah. It's real easy to be like, hey, we're the good guys when we have a supermajority, because they don't fundamentally believe that everybody should have ballot access the way we do. They're just like, oh, let's let the Democrats look really bad by just directly assaulting democracy in our state, and we could just stay here and be like, hey, it's not us. That's where we're at. So,
I went to the debate. It wasn't really a debate, but they had both Robinson and Stein over at the Wilmington Business Journal. They had a whole thing, and
I didn't get an invite to that one.
Yeah, it wasn't from me not helping, because I harassed them about it. I tried. But when I was there, one of the questions I asked the candidates was, one of the reasons why I believe North Carolina is one of the top gubernatorial races in the country right now is because it's so divisive between Robinson and Stein. Mm-hmm. So what that tells me is we're in an era of polytainment, and the only reason why they're focusing on it is because they can get eyeballs on TV channels so they can sell advertising. It's the way I look at this. So what I asked them is, with that being said, and knowing that that's the only reason that they're really watching you, because there's a lot of other states out there that have very close races, what are you going to do if you become governor to get the North Carolinians to come together and to take apart the divide? Neither one of them wanted to answer that question, so I open it up to you.
Yeah, I mean, so first off, of course, neither one of them wanted to answer it, because the totality of their support, especially when neither of them will really put any policy positions on their website, on I Side With, on Ballotpedia. it's not in their interest to do anything other than keep us divided, because if they had to focus on policy, North Carolina doesn't even know what their policies are because they won't tell us. When I think, how would I unite North Carolina? I think my platform does that. I tried to very specifically look at issues that North Carolinians say are important to them, that the Uniparty wants us polarized on, and think through, how do I put forward common sense policy that can unite us? And I take, one big one, which is not polling as a big issue here, but obviously knowing where I got my start, it's an issue that's very passionate to me, and that's police and criminal justice reform.
Yes.
And when I look at this situation, we have two very, very polarized camps that they are trying to divide us and push us further into. And I would say that both of those camps, when you look at them objectively from outside the camp, are taking completely illogical positions. And that's the all cops are bad position and the blind back the blue position. I don't think regular people can look at that objectively and think that either of those positions is reasonable. Yet they're pushing us there. I think most people would probably fall where I am. We want our cops to be the most well-trained, professional people who take their job responsibly, respect the rights of the people that they interact with, and generally serve and protect their communities, while avoiding doing stupid things that cost taxpayers money and take money away from roads, schools, bridges, and all of these other things. So I looked forward to put forward a unity platform, and I tried to do that with everything. Government transparency, education, healthcare, the economy. I think if you put forward a platform that doesn't focus on division, but focuses on actually solving real problems, and then you do it without getting in the line of attacking Robinson or Stein, like, I won't attack them for their bad character flaws. I think they have them, but I'm not going to attack them on them. I'm going to attack them on policy. My only problem is it's really hard to find out their policy because they're not actually putting it out there. So if they gave me more policy to attack, I'd attack more of that. But I just don't want to go negative. They've got that covered. I want to present solutions. Whether or not North Carolina chooses to act on that and vote for that, we'll find out in November. But I do think it will eventually happen, because you can only divide people so long while you work against their interests. Eventually, you're going to make things so uncomfortable that the division's not going to work, and they're going to realize that their neighbor who votes different from them and who thinks different from them is not the one that's hurting them. It's the people that they're electing, whether it's their neighbor that they disagree with or even the person that they choose. When they realize that, when it becomes undeniable to the average person, that's when the Uniparty falls. I'm just going to be that messenger to say we need to bring that on sooner rather than later so we can avoid future pain.
Yes. I like that. So I'm assuming the answer to this.
Okay.
But success, what does that look like for you?
I mean, the reality is, like, I'm almost 42 years old. I have a lovely wife, family, community. I'm happy with the success of that regardless. But when I look at it through the lens of this run for governor, I think from day one, my strategy has always been to align multiple levels of success, right? The ultimate success, the ultimate win, so to speak, is the governor's race, right? If enough North Carolinians check a box next to my name, I can spend 4 years being a true civil servant and really working to solve these problems that the Uniparty has no interest in fixing because it means money and votes for them in the future. That's the ultimate win, right? Which is largely out of my control, right? I'm facing a $150 to $200 million machine. So then I start saying, well, what are some next tier wins? And I feel really good about those. And I don't want to get overconfident in those, but I feel pretty good about those. One of the most important goals, right, is ballot access. We've seen how this is. We've seen how they rigged the game against all these third parties. I have an opportunity to secure ballot access for the Libertarians for the next 4 years. That, to me, is one of the goals that I cannot fail at. That is like my primary goal. I want to accomplish more than that, but that's like the I must do this goal because that's kind of the nature of it, and I feel really good about that. The next level goal is always, how do we move policy in the direction of the people? So by putting forward this platform, right, especially the bigger vote total, right, that puts more pressure on the system. So you put these ideas out there, and if people read a policy and they're like, oh, this is common sense. This is great. Of course I want to do this. That puts it in their head. It plants the seed. And the more the Uniparty, if I don't win, goes in the opposite direction of that, now we even set it up where they're becoming the advocate. Because if I'm going to win, it's not going to come down to the amount of people I can reach. I can only go knock on so many doors. Right. I can only make so many phone calls. I can only do so many podcasts, interviews. Where it will truly happen, the revolution, so to speak, of rejecting this, and I think that a peaceful revolution of rejecting the Uniparty is actually very much our best solution as a country, big picture. I think where that'll happen is when, whether it's a specific policy position, a character trait, whatever it may be, when it inspires people to go out and say, you know what, I'm not only going to vote for this person, I'm going to tell everybody I know to vote for this person, and here's why. When that happens, and it starts with maybe dozens of North Carolinians, and then it becomes hundreds of North Carolinians. At the end of the day, it really is as simple as if like 2.5 million people check a box on a ballot. If they do that, we can change all of this real quick. It's just a matter of how do we get there. And I believe that it's going to come down to true virality, not the virality of social media, because the reality is if you're running on something that's a real threat to the system, there's no doubt in my mind that they will just block that virality and censor that virality. If they see real steam and they're like, oh no, Mike's growing, he's going to win. Guess what? They're going to shadow ban all my social media. They're going to shut all of that down. But what they can never shut down is someone that whatever that message is inspired, who's going to go out when they're out having a beer with their buddies and say, you got to vote for this guy and here's why. And when I'm able to get regular North Carolinians across the state or some future candidate, if I'm not able to do this, but that's what it's really going to take for the third party, is when you're able to convince someone so much that they become an advocate and a force multiplier for you. That's going to be, however this system gets broken, whoever is able to successfully do that, that's going to be why. It's not going to be on them. It's going to be on their ability to get either a message, a policy, or something that inspires enough people that regular people become the promoters. Because then it doesn't matter how much money their R's or D's have. Nothing else matters. When you truly have the people of North Carolina behind you, you're going to win. I don't care what letter's in front of your name. I don't care what you're running on. If you get the people, and it's not going to be social media. I know we're here doing this. Yeah. If I become a real threat, they will censor me. The second they're like, oh no, he's going to win, they're going to shut all that off. So I think it comes down to how do you get that message out there enough that it's not me growing something that they can shut down. You now have an army of people out there that are pushing it, because that's how the win will happen. At least that's my prediction. Whether it's this race, wherever it is, the first time the Uniparty falls at a state level race to a Libertarian, that's going to be why.
Yep. One of the things I just want to, you kind of touched on too, but I always tell everyone, because everyone knows I kind of lean into politics, is if you feel disenfranchised, they're just like, no way. If you feel disenfranchised with a Democrat or Republican, even if you don't like the policies that Mike has or whatever the case may be, just showing up and voting for someone who does have the policies that you agree with means a whole lot more than you not showing up. And because that's what they want you to do, right? Is the Democrats don't want the Republican people to get out and vote, and the Republicans don't want the Democrats to get up and vote. But if you say, hey, you know what? This system is broken. I'm going to vote for the Green Party. I'm going to vote for the Libertarian. I'm going to vote for the Forward Party. That shows them, hey, not only did I not show up to vote for this, I didn't think it was worth it, but I actively got up out of my chair on November 5th, and I casted my vote to say not anymore. So for you guys that are out there that weren't going to vote because you were disenfranchised, get out and vote. Do a little bit of research. Look at Libertarian. Look at anyone else that's out there that it's running right now. Please show them what's going on.
Yeah, and if you really don't like me or even any of the candidates, just in line with, hopefully my quirky sense of humor is going to come out. But the reality is, when I go in to vote, if I truly don't like all the options, don't be opposed to writing in a message to your government. Yeah. I can't tell you how many times I've written in both suck. That's probably the candidate that has received the single most votes over the course of my lifetime, because I get to use it every year and the same candidates aren't there. I voted R's, I voted D's, but the reality is I've probably written in both suck more than others. And guess what? Like, People will tell me that's a wasted vote. No, it's not. It's not. I took time out there, and for you to say that me voting for someone that I don't want to win is how I don't waste my vote.
Yeah.
One, like, I don't know the logic that you used to get there. But to me, the biggest statement is that if I'm going to go in there, and sure, maybe there's somebody that I vote, again, especially in the local elections.
Right.
If I know someone, I don't care what their party affiliation is. I've had conversations. What are you trying to do with our school system? What are you trying to do with these things? That's all that matters in local elections.
Yeah.
So in nonpartisan elections, especially, I'll write in, if I really don't like both candidates, want better candidates, whatever. Write in your message, right? But if you're voting for something and you're voting in something you believe in, that's the only vote that's not wasted. I would argue if you get bullied, harassed, coerced, or guilted into voting for something that's against what you believe in, that's the wasted vote. And sadly, I think a lot of people waste their votes.
You actually touched on something good too. That was something that I've had conversations with other people about too, is there is a lot of races, especially local. There is only a D or an R on there, and both don't have great policies. And we talked about running a NOTA campaign, N-O-T-A, none of the above. And by showing up and writing that on there, they know that both of those are not good options and that you need to come with something better next time. So, and they do look at those. I look at those percentages because they go back and they're like, oh, shoot, we had 5% go to none of the above. Like, that's not good if that gains traction.
Yeah, so I said this half joking, but my campaign team will actually vouch for this. It was a really early idea, and I thought it was gimmick, but it was in line with the whole Charlie Sheen and Jason Momoa things. Yeah. I actually thought of legally changing my first name to none of and my last name to the above. I didn't do it, obviously, but I just got a kick out of it. Like, what would happen if we put none of the above on the ballot? And I just thought of that as a joke. I don't know. Politics is not what I want to do with my career. I wasn't getting into this to be a politician. Maybe next time. This time I'm trying to go around and do a whole bunch of these things. I didn't want to be a paper candidate because libertarians sometimes do that, and there's some merit there just to put another name on the ballot, not even do anything because you're at least financially playing a rigged game.
Right.
There's some value there. I don't know. Maybe I'll legally change my name, and that'll be the totality of financial contribution, and then I'll run a paper candidacy in the future as none of the above. I don't know. I say that just jokingly, but that's something I really think it would be interesting. If someone does that, I don't care what party they're in, just change your name to none of the above, get on the ballot. I think you would be shocked at what percentage of the vote you would get if you did that. I don't know. It's just a theory. Nobody's done it, but
that would be fun, though. That is a cool experiment. So my actual last question, since we're running up on time now, is if you could tell your younger self one thing, what would it be?
Buy Bitcoin earlier.
Yes. Definitely.
That's how I know you were in finance, because you mentioned buy Bitcoin earlier.
Yeah. Buy it at $5 instead of $500.
Right. That'll make a nice big impact.
Yes. Because you are running.
Yeah.
Where can people check out your website, follow you, kind of see more of your policies, and try and catch up on your debates or anytime you're out in the wild?
Yeah, absolutely. So the best place, and I tried to make this as easy, is if you can remember Fire the Uniparty, which I know a lot of you actually want to do, firetheuniparty.com. On all the socials, at Fire the Uniparty. I think it's on Facebook. It's Mike Ross for Governor. But yeah, on the website, firetheuniparty.com, you'll find all my platforms. If you want to volunteer, donate. We're being good stewards there. What we are trying to do is get someone in every 100 counties to at least kind of get signs up, things like that. We need your help. We're trying to build a movement, even coming out of this. We're not giving up. Libertarians need it in the long run. We're trying to fight this system. So Fire the Uniparty on any of the socials, firetheuniparty.com. And that's where I post events, things I'm doing, whatever.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks,
guys.
Got anything else?
I think that was everything I have for today. Thank you so much for coming on. I greatly appreciate you coming out here and everything. I know you don't live in Wilmington, so it was probably a trek to come out here, but we appreciate it.
Happy to. Yeah, this is awesome. Thanks so much, and look forward to checking out your other podcasts
Thank
too.
you.
I didn't want to do that in advance because I actually like coming to these things blind. I think it gives a more authentic, genuine conversation.
Yeah.
And I think that people are probably hungry for that. So thank you.
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Yeah. Catch you in the next one.